Hello, it is me, Mighty Carly D, and I am back to tell you all a story. This is a story that I found recently. I never heard of it until maybe a week or so ago, and it just fascinated me. And I just want to share the story because it's not a very wide-known story. So what are we talking about today? Who are we talking about today, you might ask? Well, my dear friends, we are talking about the disappearance of a man named Brian Egg. Brian worked at a very well-known gay bar in San Francisco. It was called The Stud. It was cash only, and they did things such as karaoke, drag shows, all those fun sorts of things. Money was getting a little bit tight for him, so he was looking for more work. In fact, he even went to some soup kitchens, and at these places he met a lot of homeless people. And because Brian had and owned a home, he was nice enough to let some of these homeless people in with him. I know I couldn't do that. I would not want to have strangers living with me. But props to Brian for, being that generous and kind to just let all of these people in his home with him. And that is still how he was, able to afford to live in San Francisco, was because he bought his house in the 70s for $19,000. I'm sure his house was paid off and everything, so he at least wasn't worrying about that. Brian was very well known in his neighborhood. He frequently walked his dog and just seems like a friendly guy. Everyone knew Mr. Brian Egg. So this story really starts in late May, early June. At first, we don't really have exact dates because nobody really knows. Also, I kicked Tesla out of the room. She's crying. I hope she doesn't pick up too much on my microphone. But anyway, in either late May, early June, Devin, Brian's brother, decides to give Brian a call. So he called, went to voicemail, which Devin said was right there really odd because I'm assuming this phone is a landline. But Devin said that Brian never really had his voicemail set up. But what was really weird about the voicemail was that the voice in the recording was not Brian. And it was someone saying that it was Brian and he was going on vacation. Devin was obviously very weirded out by this message, so he called back again. This time, a man named Nate answered the phone. This wasn't specified, but I'm assuming Nate was just one of the homeless people that Brian let in to live or stay with him. I didn't see this specified anywhere in my research, but I guess it's not too important. Anyway, this guy Nate was there. Devin was like, hey man, I don't know who you are, but where is my brother? Nate told Devin that Brian was out taking his dog for a walk, which was very normal for Brian. And Nate told Devin that he'll make sure Brian gives him a call back when he gets back from his walk. Surprisingly, Brian never called. So at this point, we know that Brian wasn't seen since either late May, early June, and this voicemail also happened in late May or early June. Voicemail and when Devin called Brian. So here's where things start to get a little strange. On July 1st, someone bought a BMW with the name of Brian Egg. The BMW was towed a few days later in a no stopping zone in San Francisco. The BMW was towed in a no parking zone in San Francisco a few days later. But no one has seen Brian. And where did this BMW come from? So weird. So July rolls around. And this is when people really start noticing that Brian was gone. About a month of not seeing him, people are like, hey, maybe we should call the police and see if they can do a welfare check and see if the guy's doing all right. So that's kind of what happened. They called the police. Police showed up and do a welfare check. Knock, knock, knock. No one answered. Police left. That's how the welfare checks went. Knock, knock, knock. Oh, I guess no one's home. Police left. So a few weeks later, on August 2nd, one of Brian's longtime friends made a post on the app website Nextdoor. And if you don't know what Nextdoor is, it's kind of like a Facebook page group for your area where you can post about what's going on. Like if you lost like your dog or something, you can be like, hey, this is my dog, has anyone seen it? Or complain about your noisy neighbors and stuff like that. But anyway, Brian's friend made a post on Nextdoor telling everyone to really start reporting all of the suspicious things that are going on in the house. Because remember, at this point, Brian's been missing for like 2 months now. No one has seen him. The police showed up, but they didn't do anything because no one answered the door. And there's still all these odd people coming in and out of Brian's home that he let in. And it seems like more and more people are showing up. So all the neighbors typing away on Nextdoor, they all really agree that like every time they see like these people outside, they're just going to immediately call the police, and the police are bound to see him at one point. So the third welfare check comes in at August 4th or 5th was when the third welfare check comes. And kind of same thing, knock, 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 this is the police, and no one answers. So the police leave again. Now this third welfare check that the police did, obviously they didn't talk or see anyone that was living there, but it really, for some reason, shook up all of these people living in the house. And they started cleaning everything. They were like bleaching the outside of the house. Soap suds were oozing from the house, and they even started like repainting part of the house. Like the outside of the house. I don't know which part of the house or why. They just started painting part of the house. It was weird, you know? So now you would think the house is spotless, right? It's gonna get real wacky here in a few minutes. I have a few more things to get to first. So it wasn't until August 7th, Brian's sister reported him missing. 2 months later. It seemed like the right amount of time, I guess. Police make another welfare check in response to the missing person report. And believe it or not, the same thing happens with all the other checks. Now, here is where things pick up. Okay, so we're on August 14th. Just confirmed. August 14th. A crime scene cleanup crew shows up in front of Brian's house. The van's right there. They're inside, cleaning away at something apparently. And so everyone in the neighborhood calls 911, like, hey, I called you 12 times. You keep showing up to Brian's house but not doing anything. And now there's a crime scene cleanup van parked in front of his house. So I guess the police now are like, oh, this is this is serious now. This is serious. We gotta do something. Also, side note, apparently crime scene cleanup crews don't always talk to police and investigators as often as you would think. Tesla, I see your paws. I know. You just bat it when you come in here. All right, so as I was saying, crime scene cleanup crews don't always talk to police and investigators as much as you would expect them to, apparently, because these guys were saying that they often just don't. They just take who's ever paying them. They really just take their word for it. I would expect it would be required for any crime scene cleanup person to talk to someone to make sure the investigation is over and they're not going to be removing or tampering with evidence, or I don't know, it just makes my head hurt. Why would they just clean up with just a person's say, you know? So police do get there this time though, and get inside, and there was a man inside named Robert McCaffrey. He had $1,000 in his pockets that he was going to pay the crime scene guys, and police arrested him. 2 days later, a man named Lance Silva was also arrested. He wasn't inside the house at the time, but he was in a nearby hotel. Lance Silva was the one actually that bought the BMW in Brian's name. So both of these guys, Lance and Robert, were arrested for homicide, elder abuse, identity theft, and financial crimes. This is in response to Lance Silva for stealing Brian's ID and buying a BMW with it. Robert was just let go. They held on to Lance because he violated parole. Lance's parole violations came from identity theft and fraud identity theft and fraud charges. It was also believed by police that he was using Brian's credit card. And he also had convictions of grand theft too. So they kind of held on to Lance for a little bit there. So at this point in time, police are doing a lot of cleaning and investigating and looking through the house. They got all the people out of there, and they were just, investigating the house. On day 4 of their investigation in the house, they're like, that picture frame over there looks a little fishy to me. Let's move it. So they moved it. And once they moved it, they realized behind the picture frame was a door. A hidden door. Cool. So they go in. Also, I don't know how big this room actually was. I know it was kind of like under a staircase though. I wish I knew the layout of the house so I could kind of figure out how big this room was and how big the door was. Is it a full-size door? I don't know. I have a lot of questions about this room. So they walk in. This room has electricity because there is a light in it. So inside this room was a giant fish tank. And the fish tank, when you first look at it, just looks like it has a bunch of junk in it. And then they get closer and they're starting to, look through it. There's fluid in it. There is fluid in it. There was a mix of chemicals. There were bottles of Drano thrown in there. Carpet, an iron sawhorse was in there, and a body. So this body, it was really just a torso. The hands were removed. I know the hands. I don't know how far up, the ladder we went. The hands were removed. The head was removed. The legs were removed. And the feet were removed. And we know that the feet were removed separate from the legs because the feet were also thrown into the fish tank, but they left the socks on, so the feet were in the fish tank with the socks on. I can make a guess though about the head and the hands though. Can identify a face and fingerprints, so that might have been why they removed those parts. And with the chemicals and the Drano and throwing them in a fish tank and the other crap that was in it, it seemed like they were trying to weigh the body down, the torso down, and maybe dissolve it. I don't believe the other pieces, like the head, hands, legs, were ever discovered. I haven't read anything about where those are now. But they took the torso in for some DNA testing, and it was, in fact, found out to be Brian Egg. In the fish tank, in the hidden room. We do know that at this point, when they found the torso, experts said that they estimate that he was in the fish tank for about 2 months. So that kind of gives us a kind of reference onto when Brian was murdered. So I've seen, when it comes to how Brian died, I've seen some reports that the cause of death was blunt force. I've seen other sources say that, yeah, his ribs were broken, for instance, but because of the state that the torso was in, it's really hard to say at this point if the ribs were broken before or after he was killed. And I hate to say it, but that's really where the story ends. No one is in jail for the murder of Brian. Yes, Lance and Robert were taken originally, but as I said before, Robert was just kind of immediately let go, and Lance was in jail for a little bit just because of the parole violations, but there's no physical evidence that either one of these people actually killed Brian. So no one's in jail. It's not really being investigated anymore, as awful as that is to say. I think it was Brian's sister. She got the house, I believe, and it did sell for $1.5 million, which is, a little bit more than the $19,000 that Brian initially paid for it. So there's a little something for you. Thank you so much for watching. I had a lot of fun researching this one. If you have any requests for any other topics or stories, leave them down below, or you can message me on Twitter or Instagram. All of my socials are linked down below. It's Mighty Carly D across the board. But yeah, until next time, so long. Did my voice just crack?